Welcome everybody to the Someutsushi episode of the Rockenjima Tea Party podcast for Higurashi. I'm your host Aspirety, and joining me this week we have kyuketsukimiyu.
Hello.
Back from her return from, was it chapter 1 or 2 was the last one you were on?
I think 2. I believe I was there for Watanagashi.
Yeah, you were there for Watanagashi. And we also have VyseGolbez.
Hello.
Kind of a regular on these podcasts now.
We are still all waiting for the moment where I die.
And we also have Seraphitic.
Hello, everyone.
Crossing fragments from the Umineko podcast. I think this is your first Higurashi one, isn't it?
It is indeed, although I have tuned in to, I think, all of the others to listen. So I've been lurking in the shadows.
Just a quick disclaimer, this episode of the podcast is going to be restricted to Tatari Goroshi spoilers only. That's chapter 3, if you didn't know. So, we have people here. VyseGolbez has read up to chapter 5 at the moment, and the rest of us know all the series. So, we will be limiting our discussion to the contents of chapter 3, and I think that should be sufficient for most of what we want to talk about.
I believe all of us are new to Someutsushi, though. None of us had read Someutsushi beforehand.
Correct, and that's interesting, right? So Someutsushi is a completely, I don't want to say completely new, but it is a newly translated Higurashi arc for the very first time in English. It was originally released with Kizuna for DS, I believe it was. This particular arc was written by Kano Kiichi, and he has done all of the console-exclusive arcs. And this is the very first one we've actually had the pleasure of reading because, none of these have had translations before. So the good folks over at Osen's Modding have brought this chapter out in English as a patch for Himatsubushi. So that's how we're reading it all today. And if you haven't read it, we definitely recommend you jump on, read through that release, and then once you've caught up to date, then we can start talking about it here. So we hope you enjoy this podcast we prepared. Got a nice mix of people, so hope you enjoy it. To start us off, I'd like kyuketsukimiyu to take us away for a 30-second recap.
Okay. So, an unfamiliar detective at a very familiar crime scene. But never mind that, because Natsume is late for school because her mildly creepy but loving grandma makes her pray to Oyashiro-sama before she departs. Natsume is a self-proclaimed country bumpkin with major self-esteem issues that gets adopted by the best girl in class. Despite Best Girl and her forgettable sidekick doing their best, Natsume still has a tough time fitting in the city and becomes paranoid. But then a distant Hinamizawa blows up and her mom kills her grandma in the bathtub and makes Natsume hide the body. But that was a dream, so don't worry, Natsume didn't hide the body. The body's still there. Time for Natsume to... Aww.
I think we went a bit over time there.
Sorry.
I guess you honed on the main points there. We have, our cast of characters. We have Chisato being best girl, and Tamako not being best girl.
I think we all had to look up her name.
Yeah.
When we wanted
in
to
prep,
refer
we
to
all
her.
had to look up her name.
Yeah.
We were like, oh, and that girl with the short purple hair who was sort of around Chisato sometimes. Yeah, her.
She was there to make Chisato more funny. I mean, there was...
Yeah, it's kind of like she's a necessary element,
She's
but
the
not so
necessary...
much an interesting character in her own right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, it was sort of the I can't remember the it's like Boke and
Tsukikomi, I believe.
Yeah, that's
Tsukikomi,
it.
I think.
Yeah. The sort of the straight
Sorry,
man
what?
and idiot kind of act thing.
Oh, Tsukikomi, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I thought that was an interesting dynamic. I definitely, while I'm not too interested in Tamako as a person, I feel like she's the kind of person who would make a really good friend. She's just boring people exist in real life, guys. We can't be too spoiled. maybe that sounds too apologetic, but
It's
I don't know,
really
I
tough for somebody
suppose.
like Tamako to stand next to somebody like Chisato and really stand out. It's just kind of the nature of nice girls in that situation.
She is relegated to being a side character, but I think she performs her duty admirably. And then, of course, we have Tomoe, the mysterious detective, who... fun fact, guys, if you didn't read the tips, you missed a lot of that. The tips actually contain a lot of the scenes with Tomoe doing her investigation, and those tips weren't translated until a couple of days ago, so there's a good chance a lot of people listening to this haven't read those yet, unfortunately. But we definitely recommend taking the time to look through them when you have a chance. But just, so before we get too deep into all that, I'd just like your general impressions of the chapter. What do you think of it, Mia?
I really liked it. It's definitely, it feels like a side story, and I think, but, I'm one of the people who's read Higurashi years ago is what I experienced Higurashi for the first time, and so having this new content was really exciting, and I like Natsume a lot. I thought she was an interesting protagonist for us to have our feet in, and I liked having the outsider's perspective, essentially, of what was going on in Hinamizawa and how it affected the world outside of it. So I thought it was a fun chapter.
Cool. What about you, Vyse?
Well, for me, it was more meh. Right off the bat, the start was a bit slow and continued to be slow.
It's a very, like I've said before, it's a very, ending-weighted chapter. Most of the stuff happens in the last few minutes. The last hour. And the rest of it is just kind of chill.
Yeah. Or if you wanna formulate it evil, you have 80% filler and then the crazy stuff happens.
Slice of life.
Yeah, I guess slice of life.
Filler is such a mean word. Seraphitic, what do you think?
Okay. So, before reading tips, I had a much more negative view of Someutsushi. I did feel like a lot of Someutsushi was sort of boring, to be honest. I mean, there was some fun bits, but considering how short it was, I think it spent a bit too long on the slice of life aspects, when it kind of should have been moving along with the story a little bit more. It felt like it thought it had more time than it really did. So it sort of felt like it dragged a little bit. And it is quite weighted heavily towards the end, which I did like. I did like the end bit, save for one thing, which we'll probably get into later. And then when the tips actually came out, and I read them, it did make things a little bit more interesting, because one of my criticisms had been that I wish there was more of Minai Tomoe, the detective. I wish there had been more scenes with her investigating the murders, all that kind of stuff. And then when the tips came out, it showed her doing just that. So I really can't complain about that. And yeah, I think with the tips is it definitely makes it makes the story more interesting when it seems like there's only kind of slice of life stuff going on. So yeah, my thoughts changed a little bit in the last 10 hours or so when I read the tips. So that is something.
Yeah. Well, so my opinion on Someutsushi is quite similar to Miyu's. I'm kind of in the camp of it's been a decade pretty much since I got into Higurashi, and so getting the chance to experience a completely new Higurashi arc is very exciting and has kind of tinted my opinions in a certain direction. But that said, I found myself empathizing with Natsume on some pretty fundamental levels, and I kind of end up really cherishing her as a character, whereas I know other people found it more difficult to connect with Natsume. I think we're going to talk about that a little bit more as we go on. But I enjoyed this chapter. It's definitely not on the same level as Ryukishi's core Higurashi arcs, and it's definitely a side story, but as a side story, I think it fills its purpose quite well. It contributes to the mystery by honing in on some fundamental questions regarding the nature of the curse, and it gives us, the perspective of how people view Hinamizawa from a more outside perspective. Could have gone into that a little bit more, maybe, but it's still dabbled its toes there. There was a point I was going to bring up. Yeah, it feels to me like this arc, it's kind of like if we took Oni Kakashi and we sliced out everything after Tomitake's murder. Or maybe, okay, there was multiple murders. So it just kind of feels like just when things are getting crazy, it's over.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, and I keep saying this with no sort of confidence as I haven't read any of the other material, but this feels like a part 1 to me. It doesn't feel like a complete story, even though I'm sure it technically is, but it feels like there's a lot more we have to go into, especially with regards to stuff like Tomoe and Natsume's character development. It feels like there's a lot of untapped potential there for arcs like Kageboshi, I think that's what it's called, the answer arc of this particular arc.
Well, there's also Oni Sarashi.
Tokihogashi is another one.
Okay. And, there's Oni Sarashi, which is the original, companion, came out before this, actually.
And the All-Star Cast review...
Right, we didn't mention that.
The All-Star Cast review does make it fairly clear that this is not the end of this story arc. As in, we're going to see more of them investigating the Hinamizawa disaster and looking more into the whole, whether the curse is real and how it's all going, coming about and all that kind of stuff. So, yeah, the All-Star Cast review does make it clear that, you're right, Aspie. There's more. We're going to see more of Tomoe and hearing more about these characters later. So,
yeah, and I didn't draw on this too heavily, but this is a adaptation of a manga arc. Onisarashi, as Kyuketsukimiyu mentioned, and without spoiling anything, apparently that arc goes into things a little bit differently. I think it has a different ending, and so I think what's ended up happening is that when they wanted to bring this to consoles, they've kind of taken this single story and they're like, let's cut it into a question arc and an answer arc so we can distribute it like the rest of Higurashi. And I think that's kind of what they were going for. So that's why it feels a lot to me like this is part 1 of a story. And so treating it as a completely final work seems a bit premature to me. So that's where a lot of my defense of this chapter is going to be stemming from. But yeah, so there is one point of the chapter which kind of loses points for a lot of people, is that it kind of fails as a mystery. It's not very compelling. It's just kind of a bunch of murders happen and we don't really do anything to attempt to solve them. It's just kind of...
I mean, the solution
feels more like a thriller.
Pretty apparent. It's
it's the curse.
Yeah.
Right. And so our options for movement are pretty limited there. It's like, the curse is bullshit. Well, then explain how this is happening. It's like, it really doesn't give us many tools to fight back. Just kind of intimidating. And I think this is something that Vice was complaining about.
Yeah. When I finished this, my main problem with this arc was that it pushed the more supernatural as the answer too strong.
It does feel like the balance is tipped a little bit in the supernatural favor this chapter.
Because one great thing about the core arcs is that both options are kept in a balance. That both options seem viable.
And that's... See, like, I feel like treating this chapter as a separate mystery is very difficult because it doesn't give you the means to solve it. But as it functions as a chapter in the broader pantheon of Higurashi lore, I feel like it is very important to use this chapter itself as a stake to drive through the mystery of Higurashi. You know, I think it is more instrumental to the whole than it is as a separate product.
I don't know. I feel like this arc is a lot of I don't know, just judging from Vyse's reaction and how I think I probably would have reacted if I had read this before knowing the solution to Higurashi, I probably would have reacted similarly to Vyse, just going, oh, it's supernatural? That seems kind of stupid, to be honest. But, like, I mean, because it is true, it does seem to really make it completely seem supernatural. And you're sort of like, so is there no human elements? But Tomoe in the All-Star Cast review seems to think that there's a way that it could be human, but she doesn't really give any indications as to how, and her reasoning for why it's human seems pretty weak. So it's sort of like, well,
doesn't give us so much to go off. It feels like was it Kanokichi was his name? It feels like Kanokichi is not a mystery writer.
Yeah.
I feel like that's part of why it reeks of the side story thing. And I think that's why maybe when you've seen so much of Higurashi, you can kind of accept it as a side story and not really a core part of the mystery. It's a short side story that weighs on the curse side. I wonder if then there's other question arcs and stuff too that have yet to be translated. I wonder if there's one that weighs really heavily on the human element of it too.
That would be interesting to look at. But as far as I'm aware, most of the console arcs take place after Sumiharabashi, I believe. I think there's a couple which are just really in the side story categories, whereas they might not even be canon. And those are a bit more of an outside case. But I feel like this is the only one we can really take as a strict question arc. But yeah, it's very much a side story. And funny enough, while this does lose points for being a mystery, I didn't really read it like a mystery. And I feel like maybe that's because I know what I know from later Higurashi chapters, that I kind of already have the means to answer most of this arc successfully. And so for veterans, it doesn't become a mystery anymore. It's just kind of like an entertaining side story.
or not so entertaining, depending on, which veteran.
Thanks. Thanks, Seraphitic. Keeping it real.
Also, as an add-on to the whole pushing supernatural too strong, and I heard that basically all the veterans agree with that as well. So, fun fact, this arc actually has voice acting.
Yeah. Woohoo! I like voice acting. It's pretty well done.
And someone thought that it's a good idea to have the main character talk in a demon voice at the end.
Hey.
We're getting to that already?
Really stupid.
Well, I guess if we
might as well.
If we want to get criticism,
we're currently talking about how this is pushing supernatural too strong. And
I guess it kind of
something that pushes that too strong.
Yeah, I hate this.
Yeah,
just gonna put that out there. I don't know why they went with this option. It just kind of seems out of place. Because I don't know any other time Higurashi pulls a fucking demon voice out of nowhere. It's just, it's pretty weird.
It is weird, and I think it's a pretty big mistake, to be honest. It doesn't. There's no precedent for it. It's weird to have happen. It kind of pulls you out of the moment, to be honest.
Yeah, it did for me.
Yeah, it actually aggravated me that much that I chose to spare the forum for that one point.
Yeah.
Any input here, me?
It's such a shame because it's such a good scene. And
He's so scared he heard her like a demon. Like, fuck, that's all I can.
yeah, I mean,
It really does push that supernatural interpretation heavier. But I really hope you don't use that as evidence for your theories.
Okay.
Because it's weird.
I have to admit, PictoShark just asked, how is it a good scene? It's a good scene for me for personal reasons. I think it's a good scene, but there's other people who would
See,
disagree.
I thought it was a good scene apart from that choice.
Yeah, apart from that choice. Yeah, so look.
Fucking talking about the last scene at the start of the podcast. Cool. Whatever,
Yeah.
let's go.
Well, yeah. I mean, we could talk about something else if you want, but I mean, because
Just go. We're already here.
because the story is very heavily weighted towards the last scene, it's probably pretty appropriate to talk about it pretty early on. I I liked the last scene because I thought that it portrayed somebody's reaction to seeing someone that they love kind of going absolutely completely insane pretty well. And I really I don't want to like get too deep into it, but it felt like the best writing in the thing in terms of how someone actually feels, like sort of the panic that somebody who isn't going crazy feels when there's somebody who is going crazy right in front of them.
This is a bit real.
Yeah, it's okay. I liked it, but I know that there's people who didn't. It's a personal thing. Take it as you will.
I mean, I thought it was very interesting. Like, I think something I'm going to be honing in on this a lot is Kano Kichi might not be a good mystery writer. He might not be a good horror writer even, except for maybe. Take that as you will. But he is a good character writer. And I feel like what he's excelled at most in this story is establishing good, real feeling characters with, like, psychologies that we can attach to. Maybe not as good as Ryukishi, because he's kind of like the guru at this kind of thing. Like, really, like, trying to compare them is, like, difficult. But I kind of don't want to, because I feel like he's brought his own, like, fresh perspective. But then we've also got some issues with adaptation too, and how, like, this is based on a manga that Ryukishi wrote, so the actual, like, author kind of becomes a bit blurry at this point. But regardless, I feel like the dialogue of this chapter was evocative enough in that I felt myself seeing a lot of myself and other people I know in these characters, and I feel like accomplishing that is quite a good feat. As for this particular scene, yeah, like, the panic of being confronted with someone you love being crazy is, you know, very real in that scene. But, people, like, I feel like even though, like, whether it's a curse or whatever is causing Natsume's craziness, if it's trauma, if it's a curse, it doesn't matter. But, like, because, like, what's important here is the content of what she's talking about, right? She's talking about how, you know, she feels like she's all alone in the world, that no one will ever accept her, and then it's like she's kind of given this ultimatum in this kind of psychotic state of, you know, I can't live anymore. Like, my life is over, so, you know, will you at least grant me this one wish of being together with you at the end and, like, ending it together? Like, it's kind of a leap there. It's like between, like, you know, just wanting to die and wanting to bring someone down with you. Like, I'm not saying that's something that I would condone by any means, but it is a thing that I can see being very real to someone in that sort of state, and no one is responding to anything I'm saying, so I don't know.
Well,
So I really liked Natsume as a character in for a lot of the reasons you mentioned, and being able to see myself in her. And I thought that made her a really interesting foil to Keiichi, because you can draw interesting parallels to what's happening to Natsume from what happens in Oni Kakashi, the very first arc where Keiichi starts, mistrusting his friends and everything. And Natsume, at her core, from the very first time we're introduced, is such a mild difference from Keiichi in the way that she's kind of insecure with herself. She's not comfortable in her surroundings. She has friends that have been helping her fit in, but she never feels like she fits in at all. And yeah. I felt like the way that she'll often withhold information from friends because she's worried about burdening them, or all of that was very understandable, and I found I really liked Natsume. I thought she was an interesting new character to lead an arc.
See,
I know this is going to be a divisive point for the readers here.
As speaking from the other side of that, I didn't particularly like Natsume that much. I also drew the parallels between this and Oni Kakashi, and to me it just feels like Keiichi was a much more entertaining, much more psychologically developed, much more relatable character.
I think psychologically developed is a stretch, man. I do not agree with that at all.
Okay, well, that's fine. But Keiichi just felt like it felt like they both had sort of some of the same problems. She goes to the city and doesn't feel like she fits in. Keiichi comes to the country and feels like he doesn't fit in. Keiichi starts mistrusting his friends. Natsume starts mistrusting her friends. There's a lot of parallels, and to me it just feels like Keiichi is a more interesting character to have these things happen to, and to see his reactions to, and to hear his inner monologue, and to watch him sort of try and figure out what's going on. It just feels like Oni Kakashi does a lot of what Someutsushi does, but better and with more interesting characters. Because here, I mean, we've been joking that Chisato is best girl and everything like that, but really, Chisato is, to me, the most interesting character in this entire arc, and at least in Oni Kakashi we have a pretty good cast of, at least 4 other characters that are also quite interesting. We have Rena, we have Mion, we have Satoko, we have Rika, and we have all these other characters that themselves are very interesting, even aside from Keiichi. So even if you like Natsume, I feel like, okay, that's fine, but the only other character who's very interesting, who gets a pretty good amount of screen time, is Chisato. And you can't have an entire arc that's built off of basically Natsume mistrusting her friends, when basically there's only one person who you actually care about. In Oni Kakashi, Keiichi distrusts his friends, all of them, this variety of very interesting characters. In this, she just kind of mistrusts Chisato because Chisato didn't tell her what university she was going to. That sort of is but that's I feel like you're focusing too much on the parallels now, because it's just this is what Oni Kakashi did and this is what Someutsushi did, but Oni Kakashi did these things better, so Someutsushi is invalid. I didn't say it was invalid. I'm just saying if the things that the things that you brought up that you like about Someutsushi, I liked about Oni Kakashi, but I just feel
why can't you like both? Like,
Well,
why does
because-
one being better have to make the other invalidated?
Yeah, so
It's-
I think
Sorry.
I think
go
that
ahead.
you're right that Keiichi is a more interesting character, but that's why I think he's in, like, that's why he is essentially the main character of Higurashi. Someutsushi doesn't stand alone at all. You can't hand it to somebody and expect them to even necessarily get into Higurashi.
Oh yeah, absolutely not. I
And
would never say that.
And so the story doesn't work as well as Oni Kakashi, because Oni Kakashi really is it is a side story. It's the characters are less developed, and Natsume is not written as somebody who has any drive to solve things, and thus she'd be a terrible main character for the greater story of Higurashi, because she has no drive to get anything done. But as a separate happening in the world of Higurashi, I think she is an interesting character, and the events around her are interesting enough and an interesting addition to the greater Higurashi mystery.
I'm willing to admit that it is a side story, so obviously the characters won't be more developed, and there's less time spent on this arc as opposed to other arcs. But my contention is Someutsushi, like it or not, does sort of have to. It doesn't stand alone, but it kind of needs to. It does need to have something there for you by itself, without needing to rely on the rest of Higurashi to carry it through. It's like when you see,
And it does.
it's like when you see people who talk about anime and they're like, oh, that's answered in the manga. It's like, no, the anime has to stand by itself on its own merits, and if it doesn't, then it's a bad anime. To me, Someutsushi is something like that. If the rest of Higurashi has to carry Someutsushi, it's like, then it's kind of not a really great arc. It's just it needs other arcs to carry it through. Oni Kakashi you can read and go, oh, okay, that was a really good arc. There's more to the story, obviously, but the arc itself is complete and whole and feels good. The same with all the other question arcs. It's like, yep, this is complete and whole, and it's a full story, and it feels good. This one...
What you're saying isn't wrong, Seraphitic, but I feel like you're miscrediting some value that people have found in this story.
Oh,
And that's that.
Look, this is all
Look,
subjective.
let me speak here.
Sorry, go ahead.
Someutsushi is valuable because it gives us different characters with different psychologies that we haven't seen in Higurashi before. Natsume is a completely unique character to anybody else in Higurashi. She is probably one of the most genuinely kind-hearted characters in all of Higurashi, without us needing to really doubt that much. Like, obviously she goes crazy at the end, but we don't have any reason to believe that she had, like, malicious intentions before that all started happening. It's just kind of like, she's just an insecure girl with, very simple problems. She has difficulty fitting into the city life, and it really, like, digs into deep of the psychology of someone who feels incompetent and is, like, striving to meet the expectations of society, their family, and their friends, and just keeps falling flat. And that was what really got me into Someutsushi. It is, like, I've said that it's a heavily ending-weighted story, and I still feel that that's most people's opinion, but I really enjoyed the slice of life in this story. It gave us something different from the rest of Higurashi, and putting that in the world of Higurashi was, like, a refreshing experience for me. Because then we can look at stuff like the curse from the perspective of someone who is largely untainted by it.
I mean, I feel like the main the main reason why we have these two perspectives is you find something different. You and Miyu seem to find something different in Someutsushi than in Oni Kakashi. I didn't really find anything different, and so I find Someutsushi to be sort of an inferior version of Oni Kakashi, whereas you see it as a completely different entity than Oni Kakashi, which is fine.
Not necessarily. It just depends on what value you're judging it upon. If you're judging it in terms of like the narrative structure and the mystery, then it's very much meant to parallel Oni Kakashi. But what it does instead is throws us a completely different narrator, completely different characters that let us experience the psychology of someone going through this experience in a very different way. And that's why I think Someutsushi is valuable. I just wanted to bring up this topic because like there is one mystery in Someutsushi that interests me personally, and that is the murder at the house. In this, it's kind of presented poorly and not really as much of a mystery because like we're not really given many clues, but all we really know is that at some point Natsume wakes up and she realizes everyone's dead. And pretty much everything before that point in the chapter leading up to it is questionable as to how much we can rely on that narration. In fact, we know we can't rely on it too heavily because it depicts the grandmother being killed and buried out in the mountains. Mm-hmm. And then we see that her corpse is actually in the house all along. Yeah. So we know it's unreliable to an extent. The question is how unreliable, right? And how much, who or what do we want to incriminate here? And I think the logical answer would be that Natsume did it all, right? It's some sort of dissociation that caused her to do it, which would definitely make sense because we are shown a scene in that whatever that was, that delusion that depicted Natsume killing her mother, and I guess Aku was there for some reason, which was interesting. Because he definitely wasn't there. But I kind of wanted to draw attention to this, because I really want to propose that I don't think Natsume killed anyone. Oh? How can we possibly incriminate her when we don't have any evidence to incriminate her?
Oh my gosh. Seriously, Aspie?
I am anti-mystery.
Oh gosh. Okay.
See on the roof. The scene on the roof. Okay. That was definitely a problem, but my interpretation here is that she experienced this traumatic event of seeing her family murdered, and then
by whom?
Mentally processed that as something internal, that's something she committed, and so then she believed she did it, is what's the important thing here.
So her family were just murdered by somebody else?
I'm not saying it was somebody else. I'm saying it's probably her mother. But then it's I think it was a murder-suicide sort of situation.
So, that whole scene with the grandmother being found in the woods is just the only bit that's not reliable. It's just that.
Yeah, but it causes the whole thing to become skeptical.
Okay, so your thing is, maybe the mother killed the grandmother and then immediately after kills the father, and Natsume fights her off, basically. Right?
Or Natsume didn't do anything.
So we assume actually that when Natsume wakes up, that puts the second or the first set rendition of the murders into question. But I wonder if was there anything to call actually everything that she sees after waking up into question? Because maybe at this point, for all we know, the first way we see the murders might actually be the way they go down. We don't know when her psychology...
It is not a mystery. Therefore, all interpretations are valid. I will not accept that one interpretation is more valid than the other. Like, I'm happy to take this to the forum if you guys think I'm wrong about this, because this is something I've been eager to talk about. And I know my theory isn't developed. Of course it isn't. There's, like, very little to go on. Maybe there are hints. Maybe there is more hints there that there's, like, indicate toward a culprit. I haven't found them yet, but...
Let's go with there's not quite enough information to give a complete solution. I'm willing to accept the fact that maybe it's not just as simple as Natsume killed her family, but until we have more evidence, that seems like the most likely solution.
See, I'm not pushing my interpretation as truth. My objective here is to make you guys question. That's all I'm trying to get here. It's just like, you don't have to make Natsume your culprit. You can have your cake and eat it too. There are other ways to look at this that don't involve one interpretation.
Yeah.
And
I mean, that's the thing that I think you do have going for you is that if Natsume is just the killer, then that whole scene with the mother is pretty much just like, oh, that was all a dream. That has nothing to do with nothing to do with reality whatsoever. Just forget that whole thing.
right.
Which I find slightly hard to accept. But
Yeah, same here.
on the other hand, I don't have any reason to say it wasn't all a dream. So it's sort of like, well, okay. We'll go. Let's all agree there's not a whole lot of information about this, like solid facts about this. So it is a bit anti-mystery.
But it is very anti-mystery, and I want to explain here that you guys are freaking incriminating Natsume too much. She definitely went crazy after that. There is no doubt in my mind, but,
Aspie will protect that
before
smile
that? I don't know.
at all costs.
I will. That's basically why I'm on here for this podcast, because fucking Natsume is great. You guys are shit take.
No, we don't. We like Chisato. We have good taste.
So I myself had an idea about this scene, a crazy theory. However, that theory is already disproved by the scenes that we get. So first, I would have to. A few scenes would be needed to not exist for that theory to even work. That's basically the entire roof scene. If that wouldn't be there, if we don't get the house scene as a dream sequence, and if the ending credits weren't there. Those are the things that disprove my theory already. Because when I was reading that dream sequence, I was thinking, what if Natsume and her mom are the same person?
We need at least one crazy theory for every podcast.
Go Vice. I want to hear more. I want to hear more. This is some Steven Universe stuff right here. Go.
Natsume is shown at a few times that she wants to get rid of all the ties to Hinamizawa. And I was thinking if the high school scenes were kind of a flashback of some kind, since in my theory, the mom and Natsume are the same person. The fun thing is with that is we know of Natsume's parents, of her mom, that she was in some lesser-known university and had trouble finding jobs because of that, which is something that Natsume can quote-unquote look forward to as well. And her father is shown to be very timid, which kind of fits Akira as well. So that basically the high school scenes are Natsume are her past, and
you're just making Someutsushi like a better chapter than it is.
Vice has actually fixed Someutsushi.
I titled this point in my notes as wasted potential. How Someutsushi could be a great mystery.
Oh,
Man.
Vice, please tell us more. I want to hear more.
I think that's about it, isn't it?
Yeah, that's about it.
You glorious, glorious person, Vice.
That's great.
This is fantastic.
You have truly embraced your inner Picto Shark at this point.
Yeah, okay. So I have a possible human theory to what the curse might be, and I want to put it to the newcomers and see what you guys think, see what you make of it. Okay, so my theory is basically all of the deaths in Someutsushi are completely unrelated to the fact that the people come from Hinamizawa. They are all committed by people who are simply mentally unstable, and it's just a complete coincidence that they're all from Hinamizawa. So let's go through the deaths sort of one by one. First of all, the old man in the nursing home, for lack of a better word, I guess aged care facility might be a better way to put it. He is, I mean, we're told
Takayama.
a little
I remember his name, and I don't remember the detective sidekick.
We're told that he is supposed to be moved to a mental care facility. So it seems like he has some kind of mental issues anyway. So it might be that this guy is just old. He's kind of crazy. He is a devout follower of Oyashiro, and he believes in this curse, which makes him go slightly more crazy. For some reason, because we don't quite see the whole scene, he attacks the worker at the aged care facility and ends up killing her because of his declining mental state. From there, in the tips, we learned that the son of that guy, Hatakeyama, you said, or something like that?
Takayama.
Yeah. The son ends up killing his family and committing suicide. My theory is that he felt responsible for his father's death and suicide, and he felt guilty and ashamed, and so he ended up also going into a declining mental state. Possibly the mental disease that his father had is genetic or something like that, and he ends up committing his atrocity. From there we go to Natsume's family, and we look at Natsume's grandmother, who is also quite old and looks to be somewhat senile. So her sort of weirdness and whatever you might call it could just be explained by she's old, she's invested in this kind of cult religion thing, and her strangeness, her kind of craziness could just be explained by that. Similar to the Hatakeyama, she's just a little bit old and crazy, but not homicidal old and crazy. Then we go on to Natsume, who is sort of the heart of this whole thing. My theory is that she probably has borderline personality disorder. Aspie, you might be familiar with this being a psychology student. For people who aren't, I'll explain some of the characteristics of people who have borderline personality disorder. For one, people who have borderline personality disorder are often very... they have attachment problems. They are often worried about being left alone. And they have large issues with people sort of deserting them. They have a very high rate of attempted suicide and depression. They often have trouble, relating to people. They do tend to come across as very sweet, but they can have violent mood swings where they can become quite violent. They also have problems separating reality from what their feelings are. So if they feel like they don't trust you, or like if they feel like you've hurt them, then you are, to use sort of the terminology, you're painted black. And you're sort of, you are completely, you're evil. That's a little bit harsh, but that's sort of the way that borderline personality disorder works. All of which are things that we see Natsume doing. And
it really does feel like the writer just took a textbook from looked up borderline personality disorder and just like, yeah, let's check all those boxes.
Yeah, it does. Like a lot of Natsume's sort of issues that we see throughout this thing are very, very textbook borderline personality disorder. And combine that with the possibility that, you know, maybe she found her whole family murdered, maybe she murdered them herself, we don't know. But that kind of traumatic event could trigger the violent rooftop scene that we see later. Also, we know that borderline personality disorder can be sort of triggered by like it's a little bit nature, a little bit nurture, and it can often be like we can see all of the symptoms and everything like that during puberty, during sort of teenage years. So it would make sense that we don't see a lot of it earlier, but we see it a lot more later after the traumatic event. So it might be that the traumatic event isn't seeing her whole family murdered, but seeing the old guy at the aged care facility die and kill the mentor that she had at the aged care facility, be murdered by this guy. So that could also be a possibility. So,
Seraphitic, I love you.
So, what do you guys think of this? It explains all of the deaths that we see in Someutsushi, aside from Takano's death. But we're basically saying that all the events in Someutsushi have nothing to do with the curse, and they're completely separate from Hinamizawa. I just wanted to throw that possible interpretation out there, just because I know you guys were feeling like it lent more towards the supernatural, so I wanted to give a possible, just human, physical reality.
I dig this. I'm so glad you're like bringing the focus away from the supernatural a little bit. We need to bring that balance back, because like it's totally like I can see it. I can see that such a huge event like the GHD would cause a mass outbreak of psychological problems that kind of ripple outwards and start affecting people in networks. So, of course, like the old people who are paranoid about Oyashiro are the first that are going to be like affected by that and driven to more, you know, psychotic levels of zealousy towards their Oyashiro-sama. and then you have their family members who are then directly affected by that. And it's kind of like a chain reaction, and I really like that interpretation. It brings the curse into more of a human perspective than otherwise before. There is another little possibility here, which you kind of touched on, which is genetics. Maybe there's some sort of like people who live in Hinamizawa, maybe like freaking, you know, a century back, there were like a bunch of inbreeding or something. I don't know. But like, either way, the gene pool is like very mixed with people generally sticking to Hinamizawa. People don't like to leave because they're afraid of curses and stuff, and kind of like this very tight-knit village community ends up becoming
Tasmanians.
Like a sort of incubator for a sort of gene pool of certain psychological disorders, and then you end up having that can kind of explain why people that are from Hinamizawa are more prone to these sort of possibilities and these diseases and other things, which is another really interesting angle to take.
Aspie. For the hereditary explanation, there are actually problems though, because for one, there is the question, why does it only happen now, and suddenly everyone...
What do you mean, only now?
Second question is, why is Keiji affected?
Like Seraphitic was saying, it's the whole trigger thing, right? The GHD is what caused it now. That's why it's happening to everyone everywhere. It's just kind of like... They have a these people have a genetic predisposition to these psychological disorders, like borderline personality disorder or what have you. And that is triggered by stress, traumatic events. And so the GHD is kind of like a ripple effect.
that explains my first question, but the second question is still unanswered. What about Keiji? He's not from Hinamizawa.
I think
he shouldn't have the same gene pool.
I think he... I mean, he's not directly from Hinamizawa, but wasn't his family connected to Hinamizawa?
No, they are not connected
older?
at all. They came to Hinamizawa because their dad wanted some place in a remote location to paint or do his manga work, I guess it was. His dojins. That is a hole in my theory. Thank you for bringing that up, Vice. But it's good. You're being critical of it.
In that case, you could just say, okay, well, Keiichi doesn't have this
Could be a coincidence.
because he was from Hinamizawa. He just has it because he has it. Like,
yeah, I mean, like,
he's not.
Yeah,
he just
could be
happens
the
to have
exception.
it. Mm-hmm. Like, I mean, it's like, you know, there's one guy from outside moving in who just happens to have the same problem as the people who are already in Hinamizawa.
We don't know a lot about Keiichi's, like, upbringing, do we? Like, they kind of just gloss over it. It's just like, Hinamizawa is the start of his life. Yeah. So I wonder about that. If there's any sort of, like, history there with, psychological stuff in his family or whatever would help to break through this. I don't know.
I don't know.
Anyway, we ended up getting caught up on the mystery, and I'm glad because it's highlighted that Someutsushi does have value in constructing theories, which is what I was trying to say. Thank you, Seraphitic. It's not entirely useless. But like I've been saying with Miyu, I do really like this arc, and I really like Natsume, and I know that not everybody is going to attach to that kind of character so easily.
While I think there's a lot of the criticisms that have been raised up are very valid, I think that this arc, at the end of the day, it still does add value to the Higurashi narrative, and I think the fact that we've been able to argue about aspects of it at least hints at that.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So thanks everybody for joining us for this podcast. I didn't mention it, but our top poster for this tea party has been Euphoria. They have joined in with lots of awesome discussion on the forum, both in the spoilers and non-spoilers topics. So I really appreciate Euphoria. Did I just say I really appreciate Euphoria? Because that's also true. Euphoria is pretty great in general. Always
Thank you
introducing those
for
new
the-
forum members.
Thank you for all of your work.
Yeah. Euphoria, best girl / guy. I was never really clear on that. Yeah, so thank you, Euphoria. I'll have a prize heading your way very soon. And we unfortunately didn't get any fan art for this tea party. What a shame. But who knows? Maybe we'll get some fan art for Kageboshi if anybody wants to draw Chisato, because I know you do.
No, we have to draw Natsume with like cinnamon bun hair buns now for you.
Freaking Princess Leia.
I'll commission art of Natsume. I'll do it. Actually interested to look up for fan art of them now, because there's got to be fan art by Japanese fans, you'd think. Surely. So, wrapping this up, it's kind of like anybody who's been following these podcasts for a while will know that this is kind of the end of our rope for now. We've run out of Higurashi to talk about. All the Umineko stuff that's been released we've finished. So, our tea parties are kind of like, where do we go from here? We're kind of waiting for news on Chiru's release and Sumihara Boshi. But in the meantime, my current plan, not going to say 100%, but very likely, is I would like to do a tea party on Higanbana no Sakuyononi. This is something I've been meaning to get into for quite a long time. I have not read Higanbana. I have read a few chapters of the manga, and it creeped me out, so I stopped reading. But I think now...
This sounds awesome. Instantly way more interested.
I think, this is going to be one of those tea parties that I don't know if there'll be lots of interest for, because it's kind of an experiment. Obviously, this is something which hasn't had an official English release, but we can acquire the Japanese version and apply Spider Lily Translation's English patch. So that's what we're going to be doing for that, if we go through with it, which we almost certainly will. This one is practically an announcement. I don't know when, I haven't set a date yet, but it'll be within, the month, I'd say. So we get into that, and but my apprehensions here are because Higanbana, from everything I understand about it, is a very heavy story. More so than Higurashi and Umineko, it really digs deep into the dark side of human psychology, and it's going to be intense. There's going to be some really uncomfortable stuff there that may deter people from reading. So if you feel like that's the kind of thing that would turn you off a story, then maybe Higanbana is not for you. But for those who are more interested to explore this really, I don't want to use the word dark too much, but this really serious and disconcerting kind of narrative, then I hope you'll give Higanbana a shot with us. I think it will be quite valuable to explore as a community. So yeah, that's my little pitch for now. I hope you look forward to that when we do it. We are doing it, I just don't know when yet. So yeah. With all that said, thank you all for joining us for this podcast. For those who have been following the podcast for all this time, we hope you look forward to Sumihara Boshi next. That's one of my favorite chapters, and I'm super excited to dig into this with the newbies. It's very exciting. So I'm going to stop rambling now and bring this podcast to a close. I'm your host, Aspirety, and with that, I bid you good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
I don't know why we said that.